Hey there, welcome back to Total Maine. Our panel from the In the Arena podcast is back this week, and we have a lot to unpack. Let's start with the ice surge in Maine and Operation Catch of the Day. Pat, this is our first chance to catch up with you on the topic. Governor Mills demanded a meeting with President Trump on this. Then, about a week after it started, Senator Susan Collins said that she spoke with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and was informed that the enhanced ice activity in Maine is over. Still, though, a lot of unanswered questions about this. How many ice agents are still here in the state of Maine? What was actually discussed between Collins and Noem? Pat, what stands out to you in terms of lingering questions about all of this?
Well, I do think the demonstrations that happened get some results. Senator Susan Collins, no doubt, had some conversation with Secretary Noem and maybe said, listen, this isn't necessary. You can get the people you need without doing this. I also think it's important that what Governor Mills said a few days back, too, which was, listen, you've got to be open with us about where these people are, who they are, and where they've been taken. So the state does not know. There were a couple of hundred people detained. The state doesn't really know who everybody is, right, why they've been detained, or where they are. Ethan, that certainly is a big part, that this doesn't go away no matter how much they shrink the number of ICE and border agents in the state.
Yeah, and that's really the crux of the matter. You know, when the government is refusing to tell you who they are taking, why they've taken them, when their agents have masks, you know, when the Obama administration was involved in deporting people, and, you know, I was very critical of what they were doing, but at a minimum, what they were doing is they would go to a judge, they would get a warrant, and then they would do this not out on a public street smashing somebody's window. They would go to somebody's home. They'd usually do it early in the morning while kids were still asleep. So they didn't create all this trauma. They did it in the way that you're supposed to do it, and you'd have a warrant from a court that actually said do this, and then everybody knew what was going on. But what we've seen now is people being taken, and the press has made, you know, doing all the investigations very well, saying these folks have no warrants out for their arrest. They don't even have criminal histories. What is going on? That's why the demonstrations were so loud.
And Phil, I think the question now is, will there be enough Republicans who will step up and say, listen, we need to make sure your tactics are proper police work, not just randomly going after people in a way that is needlessly violent?
Yeah, and I think it's already begun. We've seen it with Senator Rand Paul, Senator Collins, and others who are asking ICE to step back and recalibrate their procedures. But I also think it's an opportunity for our local and state law enforcement officers to recognize that they have a part in this way to collaborate so that people who are a danger, that are perhaps in our jails, are not released out into the public where ICE has to go and apprehend them out there in a much different environment than from a jail.
Last week, President Trump suggested that the federal government nationalize elections. On a podcast, President Trump called on Republicans to take over voting in certain states while making false claims of widespread voter fraud in 2020. The White House, though, appearing to walk back some of what the president said, telling reporters that President Trump supports states' constitutional authority to handle and carry out elections, and that he was actually referring to the SAVE Act and voter ID requirements. Maine Secretary of State Chetta Bellows, also a Democratic candidate for governor, blasted the president's words, calling it a tactic to target blue states, and pledged in a campaign press release to mail the White House a pocket constitution. Is the reaction here from Democrats like Bellows justified? Ethan, let's start with you here.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because he's clearly saying we want to nationalize elections in 15 states that he doesn't like the results. He's still obsessed with the 2020 election, even though every court in the land has told him that he's wrong. He lost the election. He lost it handily. There could actually be a legitimate conversation in which we were looking at having a national ballot, having the same absentee ballot rules, expanded rules for all states, having the same hours of operation, so that we were sort of looking at our national elections through one light, and we didn't have each state doing it the way that it's doing it. But he wants to operate this, you know, out of the east wing of the White House so that he can control it in just a few states. So clearly this is just he can't get over the fact that he actually was thrown out of office by the people of this country.
Phil, is he serious when he's talking about federalizing elections, or is this just posturing?
Well, I hope not, if it's just targeted at so-called blue states. I concur with Ethan. If we're going to have a federal ballot with consistent hours of operation and so forth nationwide across all 50 states, I think that's a good solution. But the president to basically say, no, I'm not talking about running elections in blue states, I'm talking about voter ID laws. Those are two very different things. and the more clarity he can deliver, the better.
Yeah, not quite what we heard on that podcast.
Right.
Also last week, President Trump signing a $1.2 trillion funding bill ending the partial government shutdown. In that are $250 million earmarked for Maine. Senator Susan Collins, who of course chairs the powerful Appropriations Committee, says that much of that will go towards infrastructure projects and more than $70 million for Maine hospitals and healthcare centers. Is this the kind of thing that in election year, still many, many months to go, but will this be the type of thing that swing voters could remember? Phil, let's start with you here.
Well, I think they remember it closer to October than they do in February. But nonetheless, the power of incumbency, the seniority that Senator Collins has earned over all these years is putting her in a position where these relief dollars, particularly in rural Maine and in our healthcare system, are definitely making an impact on Maine citizens.
Ethan, a meaningful achievement here from Senator Collins?
I mean, look, it's always good to bring money home, but I don't think that this is what's going to impact the election. I think she will remind people in October that she did this. I think she's trying to rely on that. But this election is going to be much more about Trump and what he's doing to this country and the impact that it's had on our economy and Maine families. She's going to have to do a lot to really separate herself, much more than she had to in 2020 when she was sort of like not saying who she was voting for and just trying to walk this kind of murky ground. She's going to need to be clear that she's opposing what Trump is doing to Maine if she wants to keep this seat.
And finally, before we go, just real quick, it is Super Bowl Sunday, so who wins tonight, Patriots or the Seahawks? Pat, let's start with you.
Oh, well, you got a quarterback for Seattle who says he sees ghosts. I'm hoping one of the ghosts he sees is Malcolm Butler, and the Patriots beat the Seahawks once again, as they did 11 years ago.
Phil, I think I know what you're going to say.
Yes, I'm going with New England Patriots. I'm predicting they're going to win 27-24 in a thriller.
Ethan, much like Tom Brady, I don't know if you have a dog in this race, right? Tom Brady said he's not rooting for the Patriots.
Are my Giants playing? I don't think
they're watching. They're hosting their own parties.
Yeah, I think they're hosting their own party. I think it's going to be a tough game. I actually think that Seattle will win, but it's going to be a fun one for sure.
Sorry. Once again, you've blundered into falsehood.
Well, thank you to the three of you for weighing in on that last hot button topic. Remember, new episodes of In the Arena drop every Thursday. You can watch it on our website, WMTW.com, watch it on YouTube, or take it along with you and listen wherever you get your podcasts.